This Rebbetzin is the soldier we're talking about that the Torah never sent home.
Welcome to Prism of Torah with Rebbe Saf Aaron Prisman, engaging divrei Torah, packed with stories and practical insights. Find us wherever you get your podcasts or at prismoftorah.org.
Parshas Shoftim, a soldier about to go to war, but suddenly he realizes he spoke between putting on tefillin shel yad and tefillin shel rosh, and he is sent back and cannot fight the war. That is the question we are going to try to deal with. We know there is actually a list of things that if a person is in one of these categories, he does not go to war. One of them is he built a new house, he didn't get a chance to enjoy it. He's engaged and he didn't get married yet. But one of the lists, the last one actually on the list, is a soldier who's afraid of his own aveirahs, his sin. The Gemara goes on to give an example of what that sin is. And the Gemara chooses, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, chooses the following in the Gemara of Menachos. And it says that talking in the middle of putting on tefillin, between the tefillin shel yad and tefillin shel rosh, that is an aveirah. A person is entitled to say, listen, I'm scared of the sin I committed, and hence he is allowed and actually forced to go back home. The question begs itself, this is the epitome, an example of the sin that a person should be allowed or even forced to go back home? There must be something unique that Rabbi Yossi Aglili decides to single out this specific aveirah. And what is that? I would like to share with you the Tolner Rebbe's mahalach over here. And he says, his mahalach is the following. Tefillin shel yad are connected to the hand and represent the idea of something I do in my own strength, with my own strength, my effort, as opposed to the tefillin shel rosh. They represent the idea that everything's coming from Hashem. And that is because the tefillin shel rosh represents the mind, and the mind knows that everything's coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The hand represents doing, and it represents the idea of kochi ve'otzem yadi. The idea, he says, that we have tefillin shel yad and tefillin shel rosh is we have to merge the two and realize, yes, we have a chovah of ishtadlus. A person has to do his utmost to a certain point and not just rely on the miracle and just rely on Hashem. Hakol yeh beseder, everything's going to be fine. No, that's not the derech that the Torah is teaching us. We have to do our ishtadlus, we have to do our utmost. But at the end of the day, we know that the outcome is totally coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We should never fall into the trap of the Yetzer Hara to say, yeah, it's thanks to my effort and I did. And that's the idea that it's so important to have the merge between the tefillin shel yad as well as the tefillin shel rosh. And hence, if a person talks between putting on the tefillin shel yad and tefillin shel rosh, that screams out this idea of perhaps, yeah, it's two different things. I know Hashem runs the world, but I also know that there's a big relationship between the outcome and how much effort I put into things, because it's me who's in charge over here. And because I worked hard, I have a good position in my job and I get a lot of money for it. No, a person has to merge the two and understand that even though a condition for the blessing to be bestowed on what we do is that we do hishtadlus, but at the end of the day, ultimately, it's all coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why the idea of breaking between the two is so bad and dangerous, because it reveals a deeper concept that's problematic by the person. It's not just a simple sin. It represents the idea that you're decoupling between what you're doing on your own and that Hashem is running the world, and the outcome, even when you do something, is ultimately coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That, says the Tolner Rebbe, is the deep shot over here, and why this aveirah is such a big one. Because if we didn't say such a mahalach, such a pshat, then the question begs itself, surely everyone has aveirahs. Even David HaMelech and Yaakov Avinu were scared that their small sins here and there will affect the outcome when they go to war. As the Gemara in Baruch says, Shema yigrom achet, they're worried that the sin they did will cause things to go the wrong way. And hence, this is a beautiful pshat. I want to share with you another pshat that I thought of thanks to the idea that the Tolner Rebbe brought down. I want to introduce the classic mahalach in explaining what tefillin shel yad represents and what tefillin shel rosh represents. And hence we'll see that if we decouple the two, it's a huge problem as well. And that is the following. We know that tefillin shel yad has to be tilted on your bicep muscle so that it is literally parallel to your heart. And the tefillin shel rosh represents the mind. We all know, like Rav Elchanan Wasserman says in Kovetz Ma'amarim, he asks a question that he says it's not even a question, but he says, how can it be that someone just turned bar mitzvah, 13 already, 13 with a boy, 12 years old, bas mitzvah with a girl, and already they're expected to believe in Hashem? How can that be? And he answers, because it's so obvious there's a creator to the world. You see, there are so many systems in the world that are perfect. It's obvious there's a creator. It's like you're walking in the desert and you see a digital camera. Can you fathom for even a split second that there was no creator for this camera? And hence, when you use your mind, it is obvious HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the world. And even a bar mitzvah and bas mitzvah person can figure that out in a second. And they're held accountable if they don't believe that Hashem's running the world. But the main thing we have to work on is to ensure that we live that idea so deeply in ourselves that it also comes to our emotions, which emotions are represented by the heart. As we say every day, 3 times a day, in Aleinu L'Shabeach, the pasuk V'yadata hayom ve'ashevoisa elev avecha. It's not enough to know it in your mind, but you have to bring it into your heart and live your life knowing that Hashem is running the world. Based on this idea, you see that it is imperative that we connect the two, the heart and the mind. And hence, when you put your tefillin shel yad, which represents your heart, believe in Hashem, you cannot disconnect that, your system of emotions, to your system of your mind, because they always have to go together. One without the other is not enough. You can't just have emotion, oh, I love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and not let it get into your mind. And you can't just have it in your mind and not bring it into your heart. A demarcation to split the two represents also, like the Tolner Rebbe says in his malach, represents the idea of not living the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. Like there are some people out there that they'll tell you, of course I believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but they don't bring it into Olam HaMaaseh. In practicality, living day by day, they don't do it. Why? Because they don't live it enough in their emotions. You have to bring it into practicality, not only with your hand, like the Tolner Rebbe says, doing it, but in your mind and in your heart. And hence, if you decouple that combination, it reveals of a bigger problem. And yes, that is an aveirah that we can very much understand why Rabbi Yossi Aglili Dafka chose this example as something representing a big sin that a person should be worried about and even go home from the battlefield. And perhaps the idea I'm suggesting is actually complements what the Tolner Rebbe says, because the Tolner Rebbe is saying the crack on the surface reveals itself by a person believing that what he did created the outcome and has nothing to do with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But I'm trying to suggest that the root of that is the fact that there's a disconnect between believing in your mind and believing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that he runs the world with your emotions and not only on the level of the mind. Yiratzon, that we'll take from this the idea that we have to work on ourselves our whole lives to ensure that we always go one layer deeper, not only in our minds believing Hashem's running the world, but also in our hearts, emotions, and even in our reflex to any battle HaKadosh Baruch Hu throws our way. I would like to end with a great story, a true story that happened in the 1970s. There were a terrorist group by the name of PFLP, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. They pulled off something that the world, I think, perhaps never even seen before that. They coordinated an operation which was pretty much a hijack. They hijacked several Western airlines. 3 of the planes were forced down onto a remote desert airstrip near Jordan. And at the end of the day, there were hundreds of passengers, many of them Jews who were held hostage out there for several weeks in the desert, in the heat, with planes rigged with explosives. Before the aircraft were finally blown up and the captives were freed, amongst the hostages was one of the greatest Torah leaders of the generation, Rav Yitzchak Hutner. And on one of those flights was a woman named Rebbetzin Harari Raful. Now, this Rebbetzin, for days on end, her life hung in the balance. She didn't know what was going to happen, no guarantees. Statistically speaking, let's just say it did not look good that they'll come out of there alive. There were definitely no guarantees. And when she was finally freed, people who were sitting next to her and couldn't believe the level of composure she had, they actually came up to her after and said to her, "How did you manage to stay so calm during that very hectic period of time where percentages, it looked like we weren't going to come out of there alive?" Without even thinking, it was so evident to her what the answer was. And she said the following. She said that every single time she felt the panic beginning to rise, every time she felt herself starting to lose control, she asked the people over there if she can please just have a cup of water. And before she drank it, she made the bracha that we all know, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shehakol niyeh bidvaro, which perhaps we don't realize this out of habit, but those words literally mean shehakol niyeh bidvaro, that everything that exists comes into being by His word, by HaKadosh Baruch Hu's word. She didn't rush it, she said it word by word with 100% concentration. And she said, I let those words sink in. Whatever happens here also, in this extreme situation, it is all coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And He is the one holding me right now. So she said, so you see, the bracha made over and over again on just a cup of water, that is what carried me through. It gave me the clarity of who's in charge. And I didn't let the Yetzer Hara get to me, even though the perception almost seemed like these awful people were in charge. But I kept realizing HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the show and we're in good hands no matter what. That is what helped me calm down. This Rebbetzin is the soldier we're talking about that the Torah never sent home, because she did not have the disconnect between the mind and the heart. She realized what life is all about, and she knew what she needed to do to continue that train of thought. The moment she felt the two tefillin came apart, every time she felt that gap was starting to open, she made sure to actively close it with one small act. And that was a bracha she'akol niyeh bidvaro. The true test is fusing the mind and the heart. Every day we all have our own battlefield we go to war for. Be it parnasa, be it ensuring the children are going the right path, health. But we got to know to ensure to go through into this battle, knowing that ein od milvado, not only on the level of the mind, but also on the level of our hearts, and know that they're all together. Have a good Shabbos.
This concludes another episode of the Prism of Torah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and give a 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or our own website, prismoftorah.com, where we have a full archive of all our past episodes. We would like to thank Yona Vefa for the recording equipment and Eli Podcast Productions for handling all our post-podcast productions. Join us next week for another enlightening conversation on the Prism of Torah.